Good morning, everybody. This is Kyle Ellicott. I am the co-founder and chief labs officer of Read Write Labs, along with our blockchain expert and representative. Today, I'm going to be going a little bit through the latest and greatest around our blockchain landscape and the updates that we've had over the past quarter. For those who this may be your first time joining, a few fun facts for you. First and foremost, we do these types of webinars and events on a weekly basis, sometimes multiple times a week, exploring various industries like we are today with blockchain. So welcome if it's your first time, and welcome back if it's not. If you have a question at any time, there's a Q&A box at the bottom or top of your screen. Feel free to put your questions there or in the chat box as well. And our team, Kailash and Philippe, our CEO, will happily watch for those and bring them up if they're relevant at the time. If not, we'll save them for the end. Again, today we're going to go through the quarterly update of blockchain. A little bit more about us. We are your analyst for the Internet of Things, everything from research. So some of what you're going to see today, our team and our analysts go through various industries globally, along with companies. We compile that research that you can access in real time, see on a weekly basis through our newsletters, or in an aggregated view like you're going to see today in visual landscapes. We also provide access to a global network of experts and partners from many of the industries and areas that represent the Internet of Things, and also provide, again, weekly education like we're doing today, and also around building a business as well. Some of the industries that we do track are around smart applications, so smart health, smart humans, smart home, the idea of digital transformation and everything that's happening and shifting from where we were to where we're going in terms of business mobility, consumer X, and then, of course, infrastructure. So what is actually powering and being built or laid as a foundation to build these technologies and these great applications that we're seeing today. And again, that's a little bit of where blockchain plays a role. First and foremost, I also want to talk a little bit about, because we are talking about blockchain, we are putting on our Enterprise Blockchain Summit in partnership with PTC this coming June in Boston, where we're going to be having experts who represent a lot of the companies that we're going to be talking about at the corporate level, the investment level, and also the startup level, to talk a little bit about what's happening in the enterprise and how blockchain has entered the enterprise market, how it's being applied, what it's doing, what it's not, what are some of those issues or roadblocks that have occurred and others have experienced, and how they battled through those as well. And so we welcome you to join us in June. Check out readwritelabs.com, where you can register along with access the research that we've put together and presentations like we're going through today from the past as well. So first and foremost, setting a foundation for what's happening today. I've given this talk a few times over. We released the initial landscape in the end of 2018. We did a semi-quarter update at the end of Q1, and now here we are coming into the close of Q2. And just want to continue to set this same foundation that blockchain is not Bitcoin, blockchain is not crypto. We're not going to talk a lot about cryptocurrencies. We're not going to talk about tokens. We're not going to get down to that level. We are separating the two because they are two separate things, foundationally, from a mindset and from an infrastructure. So please remember that as we go through this presentation, and also when you're talking about these types of terms and also applying this within your business, or looking at investments or building this technology, this is the way it is. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, we do have a few things that we're going to mention today, because there are some foundational things that have shifted as crypto and blockchain have come together in the consumer space recently. So the Latest landscape. This landscape has been a vast improvement and also a huge thank you out to our team at Read Write Labs that's worked effortlessly to get all of this put together that you're about to see today from a visual standpoint and also deep research. So very appreciative to their help. The summary or the landscape today is almost 600 companies. When we initially launched Landscape, it was just under 400. We've now seen a significant amount of new companies and funds coming into this light. And more are coming on a daily basis. We know that, but at some point you have to freeze, collect everything that you have and continue to build as it goes. So you're gonna see 450 plus companies in our just landscape alone. That's the technology or infrastructure landscape. And then another 150 plus in our ecosystem, which includes the venture capital, the accelerators, and some other new areas as well. We've seen over almost 30,000 jobs created because of this industry as it's coming together. More than $18 billion in total funding, and of that, 15 billion has been invested since 2017. So in the last 3 years, we've seen over $15 billion invested in the companies that we're going to talk about today and in the infrastructure of blockchain. And so here you go. Here's the overall landscape of blockchain for infrastructure. And we're going to go through each and every one of these major boxes from the infrastructure level to the enterprise and to the consumer. We see value in all three of these so that anybody on this call or anybody in the future has a guided roadmap of where to start if you're looking at implementation, or where to maybe find areas to further support the development and the builds that you're doing, whether that's enterprise applications or it's to your end users. And then over here, we have the ecosystem. And these are the players that continue to support and continue to invest and continue to accelerate the development of this technology in various businesses. So part one, this is the actual landscape itself. This is the infrastructure piece that I mentioned. So we have just over 270 companies in infrastructure that, if you're looking at this map, I want you to start on this left-hand side over here. So we start over here with blockchains and move across the implementation of that blockchain. So on the furthest left, we have blockchains. These are infrastructure companies that help build, that you can build blockchains with, both public and private or permissions. So they can go either way. It's a network of blockchains. Next, you have public blockchains. You have permissioned. Again, these are private, more used in the corporate sector. And then you have BaaS, or we're not talking about the fish. We're talking about blockchain as a service. So just like we had software as a service applications, cloud companies have continued to enter this space and offering blockchain-based services and solutions for anybody looking to start building and growing in this space. In the past few weeks, we've actually seen a greater investment in this area as Microsoft and Amazon have upped their game and actually made it easier for anybody to one-click deploy blockchain services, nodes, and applications as well. Then we get into the protocols. These are our areas of open source, development, and further support for what you're looking to build. Side chains that work in parallel to the main blockchain or a split of. Then we get into smart contracts, the dApps or the developer applications, the tokens that may or may not support each of these pieces. And then we get into the mining and exchanges. So if you're looking at, where do I start getting into blockchain, or hey, we're talking about blockchain all the time, who are some of these players that we should be looking at? Start at this infrastructure level. Start right here on the left-hand side and start looking at these companies that represent blockchains. If you're a corporation in the banking sector, if you're dealing with personal information in say, pharma or healthcare, start right here in this permission blockchain space. If you just want to get started, you've never done this before, and what the hell, let's see what happens. Start right up here in the top at the public blockchain sector, and you'll start to find and understand all of the information and who may be good for you to start with. If you're already using a cloud platform, again, I recommend the blockchain as a service because you can quickly, easily deploy a blockchain node right through your AWS, your Azure, etc. Deployments that you may already have. Next is the enterprise. So we're seeing about 200 plus different companies right now that are building on the enterprise or at the enterprise level. The majority of these are platforms that you can work with. They're infrastructure that you can build on top of, or they're key examples of market leaders in the enterprise space, building the next generation. So they may be your competitors, they may be people you want to work with or partner with as well. And the area that I've gotten really excited about seeing as it grows is this retail sector, particularly the company Flexa, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. Supply chain, we continue to see grow, and if anything, more refined in the companies that have been building in it. Construction is a new category that we're starting to see in this landscape. We have one company and are evaluating several others, but keep an eye on it as real estate has started to grow, now has construction and some of the industrial Internet of Things categories as well. Continuing to see growth in autonomous and IoT, fintech, of course, and then another new category is digital assets. And digital assets has been talked about pretty extensively, and I can tell you in the next update, this will get further expanded to assets and more. But companies like Starbucks, Whole Foods recently, and several others have started coming out and talking about how they're going to be applying digital assets. And digital assets can range anything from digital currencies to tangible physical goods that have been digitized. A company very well known and growing in this space, two actually. One is TokenSoft that can help create digital assets for you. So if you have something physical or you're looking to create a securitized, again, digital asset, they work with a number of companies to make this happen and create their own. And then also Bakkt, BAKKT. They are a company that's currently working with Starbucks and a number of other corporations, helping them with this process and being able to use digital currencies to purchase physical goods or physical goods to purchase other digital goods as well. And so watch for that area as it continues to grow and develop. Consumer. This is continuing to explode and continuing to grow. We've kept it under about 200 companies. This update, as well as there's still several companies that are being evaluated, whether projects are moving, living, dying, pilots turning into projects, things not working out, things are working out. This landscape, or this part of the landscape, will continue to evolve pretty dramatically over the coming next 2 quarters. And right now, we've seen some new sections which include charity. So we have several companies that are helping to not just allow for charity donations with digital currency, but also to add transparency to the donation process, so that when you donate your $5, you donate your $100, you know exactly where that money is going, who it's changing hands with, what it's being used for in terms of purchasing or payments. So now adding that, again, level of transparency to the charitable or donation process that we just haven't really had in most cases. Next is collectibles. So digital assets was the enterprise side. Now we're getting into the collectibles, which is the consumer side. And this is the idea of, think of it as the baseball cards you had as a kid now being digitized, so no longer having to carry that piece of paper, but instead it's a digital form. And with that digital baseball card, there are still a rarity case to them. So there's only so many in existence, which allows for the value increase, but they also have experiences tied to them. So maybe your favorite player now can talk to you and say your name, wish you happy birthday. You get free tickets to a game. When you walk into the stadium, you're now presented with a backstage pass at the latest Taylor Swift concert. Collectibles are going to be a growing sector in the landscape. So digital assets, digital collectibles, definitely pay a lot of attention, as there's a lot happening in the entertainment industry right now. So from media to sports to music in this space, and it's just going to continue to grow. Along with gaming and gambling, we're starting to see that start to be refined as these companies continue to increase as well.
Hey, Kyle, quick question for you.
Sure.
VR, does that include AR and XR or just VR?
I think we combined a little bit of it. I will say the next landscape, to the person that's asking the question, the next update will have all three. AR, we'll just call it mixed reality, MX. MX has had only a few real true applications. A lot has been talked about, but not has actually come to light. So we've been a little bit tight on that sector. So the answer to your question is right now it includes only a few, mostly VR, but only a few of AR and MX. But in the next landscape, that'll start to add depth. Great question. So part two, this is the ecosystem. When Philippe and I and the team started talking about this landscape in particular, I wanted to make sure that we had two pieces of this. One was the infrastructure and technology, and two was, who's funding it? Who should I be working with if I'm a startup? Who's producing the media? What's happening? And get a sense of who's actually someone you can turn to for knowledge in this space, because it is ever so evolving and wild and crazy, if you will. And so with that, we created this side of the landscape. There's, I think, just under 200 companies in total. First is the venture side. So we have a couple hedge funds like Arca, Protocol Ventures, and others who are playing both in the tokens, so digital currencies, but also playing a lot in blockchain and its infrastructure. Then we have venture, and these are both new venture groups and traditional venture groups getting into this space. And why it's important to mention both. You have someone like Union Square Ventures or Andreessen Horowitz, who traditionally has invested in several different technologies on their growth curves and before and after. However, now with this new industry, we have funds that are getting created almost on a weekly, monthly basis, specifically for this technology and its future. There was a fund that was just created by Edith Young and her team, so former 500 startups, just to focus on the future of infrastructure and blockchain. You have others like 7BC, Blockchain Capital, and there was one other one I wanted to mention. Oh yes, TMT Blockchain Fund, that are very, very focused, again, solely on this industry, which is exciting to see, along with crowdfunding. Seed Invest was recently acquired, and now Seed Invest also has blockchain and digital currency-based crowdfunding applications, Bank to the Future, Indiegogo, Republic. All of these companies are realizing that this is a future technology and a future that they have to be a part of in funding. Accelerators. Our background comes a little bit from the accelerator world. And so I did want to call out those that I think are great if you're a startup or if you're a corporation looking to partner with an accelerator and know where you're going to get great support. So these are a few of the companies, just over 25, that are accelerators in the space that are helping different companies and really using the services they use in other industries to be applied here. And there is one that just recently was announced that's challenging Y Combinator, which we'll see how that happens, but they already have 25 different companies in their portfolio. And it should be exciting to see how that gets created over time as well. And that's Creative Destructive Labs. They put about $100,000 in companies and again have about 25 today. But you'll see plenty of well-recognized names that have traditionally been in all different industries who now are working with at least, I think it's 3 or more companies in their accelerator. Fidelity at the bottom here has their own accelerator, same with Barclays, solely again for the development of this technology externally, but also to use internally as well. Consortia. So these are a new addition to this part of the landscape. We've had several different conversations with people in the industry about the growing importance of these working groups. These are groups that bring people together within the same industry for, we'll call it collaboration and co-opetition. And the idea is to bring people together in the same industry with the same common goal to figure out how to get to that common goal leveraging blockchain technology. What standards, what governance, do we need to develop technology together? How can we work together to ensure the future of our industry has this technology put in at the ground level the right way? We're all on the same page and we all have a foundation to build on as well. And so these groups, so there's 19, and I guarantee you there will be more. These groups are acting as the backbone to their individual industries. So IBM Food Trust is the most recognized when it comes to food and the end-to-end supply chain of food. The Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, EEA, is also an incredibly strong one. Consensus acts as an enormous consortium. R3 as well. So if you're looking to get started in this space, or you have not looked at joining one of these consortiums, I highly recommend going to their website. They offer all of the details of what they're working on, almost all of them. A few of them are private and you have to pay. Others are very public. You can join easily and have the chance to learn from your peers and work together collaboratively to, again, get to the common goal. And in some cases, they actually may already have some of the pieces that you may be looking to develop. So once again, here is the entire landscape of almost 600 companies from the infrastructure.
Okay. There was one question about consortia and whether consortia are creating accelerators at this point.
Yes, so let me get back to that question in just a moment. Let me finish out this statement. So here's the entire landscape of almost 600 companies. Again, if you're looking to get started, start here on the left-hand side with infrastructure, enterprise, and consumer. Also, start looking at the ecosystem and who some of those key players are that you might want to work with. So to the question, are they creating accelerators? I don't think I have seen any directly create an accelerator. I may be wrong on that. I have not seen it. I know they are doing internal efforts. So the closest would be R3 and Consensus. So Consensus does have an accelerator and a venture group. They have an accelerator internally and externally that does do a lot of that. Outside of that, I haven't seen an accelerator from any of the others at the moment. And any other questions related to the landscape, fleet?
There was one last question about reporting audit and asset verification. I mean, do we have a category for that?
We don't yet. We will in the next update, and I'll tell you why. Some of the companies that originally started in the landscape around protocol, around security down at this infrastructure level, started pivoting towards providing that. They saw it as a need, so they began leaving their core and moving into the area of reporting. You can also look at some of the companies in governance, and I believe I put one or two of them in there as well. But right now, it's actually been a shift in company services. Great question. Any others?
No, not at this point.
Okay, cool. All right, so trends. So we did a talk a few months ago and looked at what was happening in Q1, and a lot of that bled into Q2, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's coming. In the beginning of the year, we started to see blockchain technology on the radar and a part of the plan in overall strategy. Enterprises started moving beyond collaboration and into adoption. Patents were becoming a thing. You have someone like Bank of America who has over 100 plus patents. Governments were becoming more active. Venture capital is not slowing down. New business models get created, and infrastructure starts being more refined, and we start to see the early involvement of applications. So what's been exciting is actually these trends have continued. They've actually gotten clearer and again, more refined. So blockchain now it's not just on the radar, and it's not just a part of a plan. It's almost a required part of the plan, which we'll show in a second. And that's at many levels in organizations. Enterprise are not just collaborating anymore, and they're not just adopting, but they are forcing integration or pilots and figuring out if this technology works for them. And if it does, how does it integrate into their business? How does it create new business? How does it integrate into the current stack? And what does it mean for customers? And they're actually doing these types of things and not just asking as many questions anymore. The patent game is still strong. Not much has changed in that trend. There is one question, and Bank of America is around that. Bank of America has had some executives come out and say they don't see any real use case for blockchain technology in the enterprise, let alone in their industry. However, they have, I think, the number one or number two most patents in the industry. Kind of questionable as to what's going on there. Governments are continuing to be active, but now we're switching to not just supporting, but actually applying the technology into their processes or as future technology around applications like voting and in other areas as well. Venture capital, we've talked about, that's not new. It's continuing to increase. We're seeing funds at the levels of 20 to 50 to 100 to $500 million getting created on a regular basis. And new business models are continuing to be released. So in Q1, this is the list of companies I presented that were really stepping up to the plate in a big way and actually applying the technology. JP Morgan at the time had come out with their token, and now they've created one of, arguably right now, one of the highest potential blockchain, Quorum, that is being leveraged for banks and then also just enterprise privates or private enterprises as well. HTC released their phone or teased their phone in Q1. Now the phone is becoming a thing. Samsung is getting deeper with their phone. And what I mean by this is the two companies have released phones that have blockchain technology integrated into it and also have that integrated into the browser. From the browser, you can directly pay with digital currencies or leveraging a wallet through Opera's browser only on those particular phones. Starbucks, I added as it was a transition between the two quarters, but said Starbucks came out on the digital asset side. They've also just teamed up with, I believe it was Microsoft, IBM. So yes, so Starbucks actually just teamed up to handle the bean to coffee part of their world. So that's anybody that buys a cup of coffee at Starbucks will see exactly where their bean came from, all the way through its journey into the cup in your hand. And so that's actually something they're rolling out along with this new digital assets process. And they've just partnered with Gemini, a large company, and Flexa from the retail sector to allow for payments with all types of currency, digital and traditional fiat as well. And Tiffany's announced and began their process of doing the same thing as Starbucks with coffee, but for diamonds. So you can see now that your diamonds have been ethically sourced, where they've come from, their process, and then how they got to you and the product you've purchased. Now, Q2 going into Q3. Huge thanks to Forbes for doing this list. Forbes recently released the $50 billion blockchain babies. And these are 50 enterprises that are leveraging blockchain technology in their enterprise and for their customers that are over $1 billion in valuation and continuing to do over $1 billion in business. I wanted to show this because I think it's very, very, very crucial to the growth of blockchain within the enterprise and showing how it's continuing to grow, and not just in specific industries, but many, many industries as well. And to call out a few, we've already talked about JP Morgan. Microsoft is, again, upping their game with Azure and their cloud services, making it now easier to do almost a one-button click to deploy your blockchain app or product. Nestle just came out and also are starting a project in France to allow for customers to scan a QR code and see where some of their goods came from the sourcing to the manufacturing to the product packaging to the store where they bought it as well. And they'll also be able to, this is particular to a product that uses and leverages potatoes. So they'll be able to see not just where those potatoes came from, but also who the farmers were and information on the farms that the potatoes came from to make the particular product that you're looking to purchase as well. And then we have a few more. So Volkswagen is getting into the mix, jumping on the ethical sourcing. And we're starting to see them source with Ford and a few others around cobalt, which is used in the car batteries as well. And then Pepsi also just announced a successful pilot into the digital advertising space, leveraging blockchain, where they saw an almost 30% increase in responses to their advertisements that they sent. So I'll have more information on that in the next update as it comes. So future outlook. Want to talk a little bit about the recent report that Deloitte put out just a few weeks ago. And again, this goes kind of to the trend and theme, as you see, because it is something that matters right now, is blockchain in the enterprise. And right now, this is a great comparison from this year to last year. So when we launched the landscape to this next version of the landscape, as to where blockchain sits within organizations. And you can see that it's continued to grow as a top 5 strategic priority within the organization, which to me was a huge jump to see from years past. And then in terms of overall attitude and adoption, so 86% of companies right now see this as something that they will have to, or blockchain will achieve mainstream adoption. And over 80%, small knock on Bank of America, do see that there's a compelling use case or business case for blockchain as well. And I think probably one of the larger stats is towards the bottom right here, is that 77% of those surveyed see that they will lose a competitive advantage if they don't adopt blockchain technology as well. And yes, I'm sure there's going to be a few questions. 43% did say blockchain is overhyped. I think that goes a little bit into how blockchain really started to come to light. And again, the first slide of talking about blockchain is not Bitcoin and it's not cryptocurrency. I think there's still some terminology confusion there.
Hey,
so I expect that to go down.
One of the things that's interesting, though, is the 86% blockchain technology is broadly scalable and will eventually achieve mainstream adoption. And then the executive team believes there is a compelling business case for blockchain. And then the last one, 43% blockchain is overhyped. It sounds like there is some confusion here.
Yeah, I agree. And this is, when I was looking at the survey results, that was, I think, the first thing I highlighted as well. And I part of me wants to say that within the enterprise, people want to believe there's a use case. They see it being applied to their business. However, there may be a lack of education of how it's going to apply. It may still be in pilot, so it's not yet proven. And so I think that's where that kind of gets blurred, is there is a business case, but it's still overhyped because it hasn't proven itself to us, is my personal opinion, and also from what I've talked to others about as well. And the 81% wanting to replace their current systems of record.
That's amazing. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you've been in the industry, in the enterprise industry for a very long time investing, and I've seen it on both sides, and I have seen some systems today that are still being used from the 70s and 80s. And to have that much of a percentage wanting to replace it, that's a huge buy-in to the technology. So upcoming trends for the rest of 2019, blockchain in the enterprise. I have said it about 10 plus times on this call, but nonetheless, it's an enormous theme. For this type of technology to really grow and adopt, it needs to come into the enterprise. It needs to be in the enterprise, adopted, implemented, and then brought out to the consumer so the consumers can see and leverage it. The other thing about this, with that, what leads into another trend is this permission versus public. And sorry for the error there, but it's public versus permission. And permission, it goes back to the private blockchain. So these are blockchains that transfer information and data, if you will, privately. They have a governing council, whereas permissionless or public transfers that information publicly. Now it's still hashed, it's still put in blocks, it's still hidden, but it's definitely transferred publicly, and it is transparent. So there's no governing council into who and what is said, and it's completely decentralized. This is becoming a battle in the war room around strategy of, do we go public? Do we go private? What are the benefits of going private? What are the benefits of going public? If we're dealing with banking or sensitive information, private makes more sense. If we're dealing with maybe a pilot, we're dealing with a test case, we just kind of want to see what happens, and we're not sure exactly, public makes the most sense. And I've read a number of articles and talked to several executives that have begun their journey on public to, again, test and see what happens, and then moved into permission or private blockchain as they saw it as a necessity. Others just stayed public because it didn't make sense to migrate as well. Ethical supply chains. I mentioned Volkswagen and the cobalt sourcing, and we talked a little bit about the bean to cup with Starbucks. This is going to become a normal thing for your future supply chain. It's not going to be a suggestion. It's not going to be a question. It's going to be something that's required. There's an enormous amount of social pressure around human labor, sourcing of material goods, transportation, who's touched, who hasn't touched your product as it gets to you in your hands. And this is going to change dramatically how brand infinity or brand loyalty works. Traditionally, we've been able to build brands and people buy products based on that loyalty. Now, if it could shift that if you don't have this open supply chain, you aren't doing an ethical sourcing of X, Y, and Z, you're going to start losing customers, or you could start to lose other things as well. And this is something to pay attention to very heavily. Retail and blockchain. So as I mentioned, this is becoming a thing. Just recently, we had some of the first payments at Starbucks. Whole Foods is now getting into this space. Caribou Coffee, Nordstrom's, GameStop, Crate and Barrel, all of these companies and more are all starting to get in the space where they will start allowing people who want to pay with digital assets, so digital currency, for physical goods in their store and soon to be digital goods as well. And again, one of the companies that I'm pretty excited about is Flexa, Flexa. They are the backbone that is powering this process with some of the companies I mentioned. So definitely check them out. But retail and blockchain is definitely going to be a not just a trend, but again, something that's going to be a regular topic for us in the coming landscapes. Digital assets and collectibles, we've already talked that, but again, see that to continue to expand. Blockchain as a service, it's not going to be just Azure and AWS, but all of those blockchains and services companies will have to start shifting over to a one-click model and not making it so aggressive to put together these types of services as well. And so again, Amazon and Azure both in the past 2 weeks have come out with those new one-click services. They've also both come out with permissioned blockchain services and their own networks as well. Capital, we're not going to see slowing down. I mean, this is something Philippe and I talk on a regular basis about, so get ready. There's just going to be more capital, but at this time, I think it's going to be smarter capital put around, again, that infrastructure, moving into enterprise and starting to look at consumer areas of investment.
Hey Kyle, there was one question which was, where are we in the hype cycle of blockchain at this point?
Ooh, this is great. Philippe, I think you actually answered, you told me this the other day.
Well, Gartner, I know what I know what the answer of Gartner is, right? But I don't know what our answer is.
Yeah, I mean, it's the quick answer is we are still in the I forgot what the phase is called, but in my mind, it's still the implementation phase. We're still trying to prove this out in many ways, but we're not. If I'm correct, Philippe, we're not over the hype, or we're not over the hump just yet. We're starting to move over the hype, if you will, but we're not on the down curve in any way.
Well, I mean, so Gartner is saying that we are entering the trough of disillusionment, which makes perfect sense given where we are. I think compared to all the other segment of market that we've seen over time, what's interesting about this one is that the challenges are seems to be more quickly overcome than what we thought initially. So
Yep.
so there are still the challenges of we talked about blockchain skills, development skills, regulation. I mean, there are a lot of those issues that are still there, but it's going faster. So I think we are getting into the trough of disillusionment, but the pace at which we're gonna get out of it is gonna be faster.
Yeah, and it's a great point. I mean, we look at what we did in 2018. So Q4, 2018, as we released the first landscape. A lot of stuff you and I were talking about, and we were talking about on the debrief of the landscape, was that people were still trying things. Things were pretty slow to move. It was I would almost say the old behemoth of early enterprise software, where we're just trying to see what's going to happen. We'll make adjustments. And Q1 started to see a little bit of a pickup. And then here in Q2, we've seen a massive surge, to your point, where people are just turning over and pushing the bounds of this technology to change faster and not wait as long. So I think that's a very, very good point.
And then we have one question from Brian,
Hey, Brian.
Who is saying that the permission blockchain is not really a blockchain, which are by definition open to all. So that's a good point.
I think that there are a number of people that would say otherwise. A blockchain, yes, in one sense, the blockchain can be defined as open to all and completely decentralized. However, you can also have a distributed version, which is what permissioned is, and that can be more internal and still have the same technology and still leverage the same component. So we had Consensus on recently that was talking about the public versus permission. They supported that. JP Morgan supports it. I can name off several other companies that support it as an actual blockchain. But Brian, I definitely respect your opinion. I think that's a very good point.
To be honest, Brian, I think you're right that blockchain is open to all by definition. And
yes.
But at the same time, people assimilate a distributed ledger to blockchain, and so they talk about those two terms. One versus the other, and there are distributed ledgers that are permissioned. So, so we are covering both because for us, whether it's open or not to all is not really the issue. The issue is really is distributed ledger going to be a key piece of middleware moving forward? And I mean, what we're seeing at this point is yes. And so now after that, how this is going to be implemented is remain to be seen, right? So that's the reason why we're looking at both at the same time.
Yeah, and thank you, Philippe, and Brian. Also, further to that point, thank you again for the great question and comment. But the other reason too is we wanted to show the options that are open for anybody to be in this space and kind of give a little bit more definition as to what people are using and how people are building in this space as well. But definitely appreciate the comment. All right. So opportunity areas, I like to kind of show this in every presentation we do. Is I think it's important if you're sitting on any side of the stage, either as an investor, as an executive, as an entrepreneur, or someone in the between. These are areas of opportunity that I see people can build in, they can invest in, or definitely have some room to grow in terms of their sweet spot. So commodities, we're continuing to see development, more corporations getting into the space. I'd love to see some more progress from the technology standpoint in this space. Retail, I think, is again continue to be hot. Food, so from delivery to sourcing to supply chain, not only is this going to be a trend, I also think it's an opportunity to build in. Data and data rights management. What are you doing with a user's data, and how does that, what is its process? Can it get stored somewhere? How do smart contracts play a role in that data usage as well? Digital assets and collectibles, I could do an entire conversation on. So I continue to see opportunities there. Gaming is not slowing down. It just needs to be a little bit more mature and refined. IoT, or the Internet of Trusted Things. There's a lot of talk that blockchain is the saving grace for IoT. Philippe and I and team have had a lot of conversations about that. I think it can add an inherent value to IoT. I would love to see more companies come into this space and force me to make it a huge part of these future conversations on the way that sensors know to only talk to each other, and that when we get into the areas of autonomous vehicles, know what information to share and what information not to share with each other, or with the city, or with a bigger grid, etc. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. We just need to get a little further along that hype cycle. And then logistics and shipping, we continue to see developments there, but there's still a lot of opportunity as well. Blockers haven't changed except for one addition. So we've always talked about performance, scalability. Regardless of what the survey said, scalability is still an issue. There are some companies coming out to work on that and trying their hardest, but it's still an issue. Complexity, as Philippe mentioned, it is still a complex technology, but it also is improving faster. So that complexity is starting to lessen, but it's still there. Adoption, education, and governance. This is where the consortiums come in. This is where more conferences and groups are starting to get a little bit more serious about the content and the direction of where this industry is going. The thing I've added is mindset. When it comes to implementing blockchain, distributed ledgers, joining consortium, pushing this industry forward, pushing this technology into implementation in your organization, at the end of the day, it's a mindset. Are you ready to make that big and dynamic shift? Are you ready to put your information, to Brian's comment, are you ready to put that in a public, or bring it and keep it in a public form? Are you ready to open up your supply chain and show everything behind the scenes? So that's the added blocker this time around. But other than that, I'll pause for a little bit, see if there's any other questions.
So, Kyle, we have one question, which is, how does that fit into the Internet of Trusted Things of our dear friend Jeremiah Wayang? Do you want to quickly comment on that?
What's that? Jeremiah, can you clarify that? And what
Jeremiah Wayang came up with this report, right? And talk about the Internet of Trusted Things. Mm-hmm. And so it's the integration of basically IoT and blockchain. And yeah, so any comments on how blockchain is gonna affect IoT?
Yeah, I think it's going to affect it for the good. And my example of the vehicles. I mean, right now we've got a few different issues. One is security, which is the most commonly talked about when it comes to IoT. So security of devices, security of data, security of information transferred, just general security of these devices that we have more and more in our homes. To the connection. So knowing sensors, understanding where they should be or not connecting to each other. And again, the release of what data and to where. And then also applying that through, what's the example I wanted to give? Also applying that to events as well. So in a supply chain example, if something is not delivered fresh, a sensor realizes that sensor knows what information to share with an insurance company versus what information to share with a grocer or a restaurant, for instance, and can trigger an event to automatically ship a new product out to the restaurant, for instance. And then the insurer can then deposit the currency back to either party. Right now, this is not something that IoT is doing in a scalable way, just because of the release of information and just the overall scalability of the sensor network. So I think that's one, being able to create multiple nodes. So using cell phones, using any sensor or any server or anything with a connection to the cloud as a node to be able to transfer information, and leveraging blockchain as a backbone to that, I think, is another area. So lots of different ways, but security, data transfer and rights, and then kind of a backbone for sensors.
Yeah. No, exactly, Kyle. I mean, to come back to this point, I mean, blockchain is a key component of the infrastructure of the Internet of Things in the future, for people, for things, for contracts between people. So yes, we're gonna over the course of the next 6 months, we're gonna spend even more time as we are going to focus our attention on the edge and devices and robots. That there are going to be, of course, we need to be able to implement those tools and connect them to the internet and enabling them to talk to each other. And the only way we can do that is by having a ledger at each edge. And the only way that can be done is through blockchain. So Internet of Trusted Things is happening, and blockchain is going to be part of it.
It's exciting. I mean, it's incredibly exciting. You and I have had some great conversations with people recently of what's to come in this industry, and I think it's going to be pretty exciting, to say the least. So.
Very quickly, another question. Jerome James is asking, what kind of efforts do you see are we seeing toward education? How it's explained to consumer and how it's being introduced to students.
Yeah.
At the middle and high school level.
Sure. So
very quickly, we have two other questions. So.
Yeah, the days of being able to forge your parent's signature on a permission slip are over. But the way it's being applied today right now is mostly around test scores and grades. And then also around agreements. So the permission slip, for instance, around like a smart contract, or also grades. So as you get graded on a class or a semester, that grade is forever sealed and unable to be tampered with. But there's other areas I can talk about in the future as well, but that's the quick version. So around scores and grades.
Yeah, no, exactly. And as you mentioned, students, we're still there's still a lead time, and students in middle and high school should be exposed of what's happening, because in the next 20 years they are going to be living through it. So it's important to have those level of education, and it's probably right that they don't have the right level of understanding of what's going to happen and the world they are going to live in.
Right.
But I mean, I think it's true for everybody at this point. I mean, the revolution that we're seeing coming is going to be 10x bigger than mobile, and nobody's actually working with the people to help them understand that. But that's going to come. Then Yev is talking about major complaints do you hear about existing blockchain platform, enterprise platform, speed, scalability, anything else?
So the benefits of using.
Yes, about existing enterprise blockchain. So I think that was your slide, right? The slide before.
Yeah, definitely. With jumping on some of the enterprise blockchains, they also have working groups, consortiums, governments, a lot of this stuff already in place. So it actually saves you a little bit of time to go down that route, because that's what they're being built for, is to actually fix some of these blockers and make things move a little bit more streamlined.
All right. And one last question before we go. Can blockchain be used to have shared ownership of high cost assets?
Yes,
Yes.
but that has a component of tokenization, which is for another day. But yes, it can be.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Kyle. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation. Looking
Thank you.
forward for people to come meet us. If you're in Boston and New York, we're going to be in Boston on June 10th at the conference. So please stop by and talk to us at that point. Okay.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, Fleet.
Bye.